Welcome back to another day here in Managua, Nicaragua. When you last saw me, I was heading over to the mall to get some air conditioning, which I did, and then I crashed out as soon as I got back. And that is how you have to cross the street in Managua. So we have returned to Parque Central here in Managua. It's ironic after talking up the bus system, and then it took about a half an hour for the bus to show up. But still showed up, and the directions were spot on. And it's 2.5 Cordoba, so can't beat that. This structure in front of me is what's known as the Temple of Music, or La Glorieta in Spanish. And it sits right here in the middle of the park. We are heading over to the National Palace building, which is here. And there's a museum inside to check out. Here is, of course, the cathedral that sits here on Revolution Square that has sat basically in this condition since the earthquake in 1972, which almost flattened most of downtown Managua, killed thousands of people, and really changed this country in many ways. It sort of became a flashpoint for the revolution after the president that was in power at the time basically embezzled all of the funds that were raised to help support the people and recover the city. And so from that point forward, really the revolution kind of took off to a whole new level, to where the Sandinistas eventually took control in the late 70s. So let's head over to the National Palace, see if we can get in, see if we can use my camera, or I may have to switch to my phone. So we're here at the National Museum of Nicaragua. Super simple to get in. It's $10 US. They give you a ticket, and it was actually, I paid in Cordoba, so it was 370 Cordoba. Anyway, we are in, and this museum is very expansive. So there's kind of this inner courtyard here, but all the way around there's these different rooms that have different sections to them. So there's like a pre-Columbian section there. I can see there's signs across all the different doors to have a look through. So let's start this way. He sort of motioned to start here and work my way around. Almost like a treasure map of Nicaragua. So this first one looks like it's the natural life here in the country. Everything here is in Spanish, so make sure if you can't at least make some of it out, that you bring a translator app. Google Translate would work fine, as always. Talks about some of the different minerals and stuff that are here. I'd make a Breaking Bad joke about minerals, but I'll leave it at that. Nicaragua is definitely a country that has a lot of different environments in it. You know, as we've seen on this trip, you know, we started in Chinandega, where it was, you know, surface of the sun hot every day. Not that here's any cooler, but Chinandega is the hottest city in the country. Averaged about 35, 36 degrees every day. And then from there, of course, I went up into the hills, up into Esteli and Miraflor and Jinotega, where at night it was, you know, single digits. And especially while I was there, because there was a cold front all the way from Canada that brought the temperature down to the point where it was below zero at some of the higher points in the country. As I mentioned, I think in my last video also, but worth mentioning here again, Lake Nicaragua, or Lake Cocibolca, as it's traditionally known, which is where Omotepe Island sits in the middle of, is the 19th largest freshwater lake in the world. And it is sort of ground zero for potentially a new canal to connect the Pacific and Atlantic. There has been talk for years about trying to set up a canal down the Rio San Juan, I believe it's called, which leaves the Lake Nicaragua and actually goes all the way out to the Atlantic coast. I think it exits around, yeah, you can see it here, Rio San Juan, and exits at Bahia de San Juan del Norte. So really, it would just be a matter of opening up this side of the country, sort of over here, to initiate the entrance to the canal and then through the lake. What's good about Lake Nicaragua is that it's huge. The downside to it is that it's very shallow. My understanding is that the majority of the lake is less than 30 meters deep. And they've even had issues with getting ferries from Granada down the lake because it's so shallow in spots that even the ferry boats can't get down. This next room is actually prehistoric, and so this would deal with a lot of the stuff that was here, you know. Here's some coral that they found 187 kilometers from Managua, and this was actually found like up on a hill. So it's pretty amazing that, you know, 50 to 70 million years ago, this stuff would have been underwater. But if you look at the map where this stuff was found in Condega, you can see how far inland that would have been at the time. They have all kinds of cool stuff here. They have all kinds of like bones of old animals, bears, between also near the local area of Las Banderas, 37 kilometers from Managua. They found that these bones are dated between 5.5 and 7 million years ago. And as far south as we are, they've even found woolly mammoth bones here in the region from 20 to 30,000 years ago. So again, to imagine, you know, we are pretty far south here in Nicaragua, and to find things like, you know, well, these guys is rather impressive. There's some more bones here, and I'll give you an idea of the size of some of them. This one is probably 1.5 meters in height. And here's some mastodon bones also, from the same sort of 15 to 20,000 years ago. They've got this cool display case here of a bunch of fossils and petrified animals and fish. This one here has actually had a whole fish inside of it. And these were all found inland, well from the coast. So it gives you an idea of how much of Nicaragua was probably at one time underwater or in close proximity to it. This next room we're in is the pre-Columbian room. They call it the Acahualina period, which was 8,000 BC to 2000 BC. And they've got some really impressive artifacts in here from, you know, all the years in between. All these different blades and arrowheads and spear tips and cutting tools. Some really amazing pottery and stuff in here. Some of the oldest stuff they have in this little display case here, like pieces of pottery and these drinking cups and stuff, they say age from the earliest would have been 2000 BC, so even earlier than that in some cases. The detail and things that are in some of these pots is just magnificent, especially given its age. You know, again, you're talking 1500 to 2000 years ago. These incense pots and funerary urns and stuff were, some of them were just incredibly well detailed, and it's amazing to see all the different styles and shapes and varieties to them. And keeping in mind that these also would have been fully painted and colored at the time. Well, I almost missed it, but here is a piece from Las Huellas de Acahualina, which is the museum I tried to get to the other day that was closed. Well, they have a piece of it here, and you can see there's a footprint right in the middle of it. They have this really cool display / statue here of the Cacahuatl ceremony, which originated in Mexico and eventually spread as far south as here in Nicaragua. And it involves, having men up on this pole suspended by ropes and flying around. And then you'd have this dance below it. And it would have been just amazing probably to see in person. And to have this really cool statue here set up in the middle of the museum is very cool. This place is beautiful. This National Palace building, like this is just one wing of it for the museum. And they've done a really, really nice job here. They've got all these statues and stuff. There's another room here for the pre-Columbian art, which we're going to go into in a second. Just all kinds of modern art and historical stuff. Just a really cool place to see. And I mean, for a national museum, and to cost $10 is a really affordable price. Much cheaper for locals, I'm assuming. But as a tourist, this is kind of where you want to come to see everything sort of all at once. The second room for the pre-Columbian history is sort of the second half, I guess, if you will, the leading up to when the Spanish arrived in the 1500s. You can really see a change in the art and the detail work on some of this stuff. This would be like between 1000 and 1350 are the years that are marked on some of these cards. And I mean, again, just astounded at how this stuff has survived for so long. The sign talks about this being from the Omotepe region, which would have been on the island or near it, I guess. And just more beautiful pottery from between 1200 and 1550. Going to try and avoid the flickering light a little bit, but they've got these funerary urns, which we've seen at other places. The ones at Popova were probably the most impressive ones that I've seen, but it's really cool to see some of the different styles on these pots. Again, given how far apart many of these locations were. There's some examples of some of the ornaments that they have found, jewelry and things like that. Obsidian, pieces of bone and teeth made into necklaces and bracelets and earrings and all that sort of stuff. There's some examples here of some jade and gold pieces. And they call these the facial decorations. So there's like, for pierced ears or noses. And then the stamps that we've seen throughout my travels. This next section talks about some of the natural foods and healing and things like that throughout the pre-Columbian history. And it actually talks here, this sign talks about a place called Monkey Point, and where they have found evidence of food from 8,000 years ago. And they found discarded pieces of corn and that sort of stuff, things that would have been part of the regular diet at the time. And so some of this stuff is from that same region. Here's a map of the different indigenous corn types that are found here in the Americas, spreading as far north as Atlantic Canada, where I'm from, all the way south down to Peru and beyond. And then some fancier ones, more probably for ceremonies rather than for practical everyday use. And then they've got these much larger sculptures. This one was found on the island of Omotepe. This one here actually says it's a pelican, which I can see if you turn this way and look top down. There's a head and then the beak. They got these really cool paintings on the walls here too. These are modern paintings, but they certainly incorporate a lot of the traditional designs that we've seen on the pottery and things like that. Very, very cool art. On the doors here, they've actually got these carvings, which are from Omotepe, which are the ones that I saw when I was there visiting. So if you haven't seen that video, you should check that out, because it was a pretty cool experience hiking up through the woods and then finding all of these, massive rocks with the rock carvings on them. So now we've come to the Columbian period. Christopher Columbus arrived here in Nicaragua in 1502 on his fourth voyage in search of a passage to the Pacific Ocean. You know, obviously his most famous trips were the 1492, which was his initial contact in the Bahamas, those types of areas. And then in 1502, he actually made contact with indigenous groups here in Nicaragua and established a colony and used it as a trading post to work with the natives to trade, you know, for gold and things. And it became sort of the starting point of the Spanish conquest of the Americas. They have this very famous painting that I've seen before. Columbus arrives in Guanahani, which was one of the islands sort of up near where Cuba is today, and first contact with some of the indigenous groups there. This stone here is just kind of sitting here, and I was curious to the story of it. This is the cornerstone that would have had a sundial on it that was installed in 1781. And this was on sort of the Royal Road, or the main road, if you will think of it that way, leading up towards Leon. And it still has, you can see some of the original writing carved into the side of it here. And while the sundial itself is gone, there is a carving representation of it here. And more writing on this side. They actually have translations of it here, so I will put that on the screen too. So moving forward in time, we are having a look here. They've got some different exhibits here on different people and places and things in history. And this room here is on the famous painter Armando Morales. Armando was considered one of the greatest painters from Nicaragua. He was born in 1927 and died in 2011, and had many of his works featured in galleries all over the world. Here's some examples here of some of his paintings. It's always hard to get pictures of things behind glass, but if I stand back far enough, and I'll take some photos with my camera on my phone also. They even have some examples of, you know, some of his tools that he was using, different books on his work. And then beyond that, they've got art here from all kinds of other artists, sculptors, different people throughout Nicaraguan history. There's a painting of Sandino up there on the wall, and this really cool sculpture that I'm assuming is also of Sandino, given the famous hat. This next room is a celebration of different lakes and volcanoes around the country. And it's got this really cool kind of festive look to it, with all these different art and, you know, celebratory piñatas on the roof, different cities marked here. So let's see, so far I've been to Chinandega, Leon, Managua, Granada, Rivas, technically, even though they're talking about Omotepe. You can really continue to see the influence of the pre-Columbian art These are all like modern pieces from, it says here 2006. They also have this really neat section on the Caribbean side of Nicaragua, which I think is sort of underappreciated by a lot of people. They don't really realize how much Caribbean influence there is on the Atlantic side of this country. You know, there are many languages that are spoken in the region, things like Creole, Garifuna, Sumu, Mysticos, and others, which is sort of a continuation of some of the local languages we saw even up as far as Belize. And so this is sort of on the Atlantic half of the country. And you get into, there's Corn Islands way over sort of there on the edge. And then you've got all these other different sort of Caribbean inspired towns in the different languages that are spoken. El Gueguense is a really interesting piece of Nicaraguan history. It is a performance piece. It sort of ties into the first steps of post-Columbian connection. It is a combination of play and festival, has these beautiful masks that people wear. You can see here, there's a whole history of it that, I mean, I could spend an entire video talking about, but there's just, yeah, it's a really cool piece of Nicaraguan culture and history. There are books written about it, there are plays written about it. It's also known as Macho Raton. Here's a display that shows kind of like some of the types of masks that are worn. I feel like El Gueguense is something that, unless you've been to Nicaragua, you would never even know about or have heard of. But it's pretty cool. I'll see if I can find a piece of footage of it online here and add it to this video, or at least some photos of some of the performance. And we finish up with this final photo, the assault on the palace from August 22nd, 1978, when the Sandinistas stormed the National Palace and took over control of it in about 45 hours. It was the end of the Somoza government here in Nicaragua, the end of Somozaism, if you will, and began the change into what is currently Nicaragua today. So I'm really glad I got to come back and check this museum out. I have to say that, you know, the last time that I was here, it was closed in preparation for the anniversary of the revolution, and it's a remarkable museum. There's so much history and culture and information here to see. It covers from prehistoric right up to modern times. You know, that art gallery was beautiful. Some of the regional rooms were beautiful and interesting. All the pre-Columbian history that's here. A really cool spot. And I know I say this a lot, but once again, here I am at a museum, the National Museum of the country, and I'm the only person here. Anyway, that's going to do it here for the museum. Let's head back outside and see if we can go find a cold drink somewhere. Just standing here in front of the cathedral again and just itching to get up and look inside. Even if it was just at the top of the stairs here, it would be pretty cool just to get the view inside the cathedral. But it is roped off here, fenced off, and there's 2 security guards working inside, though I just saw one go over around the outside of the perimeter. It's a shame that you can't even get in for a limited look. So that's going to do it for my second time here now in Managua. I have to say that it's a much better experience this time. You know, the places I got to see were far more interesting. Things were a bit more lively this time. And yeah, just a general sense of feeling like a real capital city this time, which was awesome. I will skip doing a room review in this video simply because I'm staying at the same place I did last time. If you want to watch that room review, you can do so right here. And yeah, apart from being hot as always, you know, Managua was certainly very different this time, and I'm glad that I came back to give it a second chance. I'd also like to thank people in the comments who suggested some other places to go and visit. and check out in the city, because I'm really glad I did. And yeah, really good time. I'm headed out to Ometepe again for one more stop here in Nicaragua before finally getting back to Costa Rica to pick up where I left off last time. Thank you so much, as always, for watching. I really appreciate it. I really hope you liked this video. If you did, leave a like or a comment down below to let me know that you were here. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button down below. I always appreciate all my new subscribers. If you'd like to support me further, there's a couple different ways you can do that here on the screen. Any support helps, of course. I do all of this on my own, so, you know, but it's not required by any means. I just appreciate it, as always. And remember, life is short. Wander. And I'll see you in the next video.